Welcome back. The country's higher education system is under increasing pressure to expand access, address inequality, and respond to the realities of a rapidly changing digital world. While online and blended learning models are often presented as solutions, questions remain around infrastructure, affordability, connectivity, and whether digital education can truly bridge long-standing gaps, especially for students in rural and under-resourced communities. So this afternoon, we explore the urgent need for higher education to embrace digital transformation, examining both the opportunities and the challenges that come with it. To help us do exactly that, I'm joined now by an expert in online and blended education with extensive experience in digital learning models and higher education transformation. We'll discuss what is working, what still needs to change, and how South Africa can move towards a more inclusive and equitable digital education future. Let's welcome Dr. Shahiem Patel, Academic Dean at Regent School. Good afternoon, and thank you for your time. Let's start with an assessment of where things stand in terms of an embrace of digital and blended learning as far as the higher education space is concerned. It was an area of great focus during the years of the COVID-19, and I remember that move to try and issue laptops, loan laptops, and institutions adjusting to that, online interfaces and platforms. Since then, what has happened? Where does that leave us on this path towards digital transformation?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the welcome and for setting the tone for an important discussion. I think in 2026, we are faced with many of the challenges that we were faced with in COVID-19, 2019, 2020, and the surrounds. But I think some of these issues are systemic long before COVID-19. I think if you trace it all the way back to 1994 and prior to that date, a lot of the systemic issues in higher education have not yet been resolved. And I think for me, the opening statement that I can't get over every time I speak about digital inclusion in higher education is the fact that digital inclusion in and of itself cannot be the goal. It has to be the vehicle to get to the goal. And for me, those goals are quite simple. It's about access to higher education. It's about equity. It's about the sustainability and the quality of higher education, because we just heard Julius Malema speaking a lot about some of the local and domestic and international challenges facing the country. And it's for us as higher education leaders to produce the kind of graduates that are able to meet and rise to those challenges locally as well as globally. And so for us then, the challenge is not about whether we enable digital learning. It's about what that means and what it entails. And for me, like I say, those ideals right at the highest level of access and equality in terms of higher education is the most important thing.
So if digital transformation is the vehicle to what with regard to the higher education system? What is the end destination? What higher education system do we want to attain by harnessing digital transformation?
Yeah, the goal is, again, in an oversimplified manner, the goal is about access, definitely. So making sure that there's broad-based access to higher education, ensuring that we don't have the very same challenges of exclusionary practices in higher education that we had for so many decades in South Africa. So that's one big objective. But like I said, the other objective then has to be, what about the quality of the graduates that we produce? South Africa can ill afford to be a degree factory. We have lots and lots of graduates coming into our system, coming through our system and leaving the higher education system. But to what end? The economy can only supply and afford X amount of job opportunities. And so we need to start then having entrepreneurship being another goal in terms of our broad-based delivery through digital inclusion in higher education. So it's access, it's entrepreneurship. Problem solving is a big one, critical thinking. How do we ensure that the people leaving higher education leave with the right wisdom and the right ethical mindset and moral compass that allows them to embrace the challenges that face us, not only in South Africa and on the African continent, but in an increasingly globalized, smaller village of the world? How do we start to make our graduates play a meaningful role in enduring those discourses locally and abroad?
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not just about the number of graduates and being a conveyor belt of graduates, but it's about the quality of those graduates as well as their responsiveness, the skills and their responsiveness to what the economy needs. In a context in which you use blended and online learning, can that be achieved? For example, some of what you're talking about, the entrepreneurship skills, problem-solving skills, knowing what we know about how we deliver online education and blended learning, can that be achieved at a sustained level?
Yeah, this is one of the many creative challenges that we face in higher education, because digital learning can't just be the assumption that we're going to crack the code on these important issues. It requires us as an industry to have deep reform from within and around the industry. So every stakeholder has a role to play in making this transformation. And the transformation starts here. It's a mental transformation. We need to see a paradigm shift in higher education that says what we teach today is very different to what we might have been taught 20 years ago, 30 years ago, or for that matter, even 2 years ago. And that constant change must be embraced, because in 2 years from now, again, we'll be teaching differently relative to what we're teaching in 2026. So that ability to move at a lightning speed and making sure that every stakeholder is moving at the same speed, that's a creative challenge and tension for us. Many times in higher education, students in particular come in with the mindset that I have the schooling system of X number of assessments, maybe some assignments, and then an exam, and I'll get my results. I think that that system will not wholly be replaced, but what it will definitely require is a rethinking and reimagination of how one would assess in higher education. Maybe even a question of why assess. Why does the teaching and learning process have to happen in a classroom? Why can't it happen outside? Why can't it happen? And then again, then digital learning doesn't have to be a Zoom call or a Teams meeting. It doesn't have to be a webinar. We can use technology in very creative ways to solve those all-important, enduring principles of problem solving and entrepreneurial skills and the like. Because again, we need not only access and we need not only quality, but we need sustained access and quality. And so that's why I'm advocating for a strong mindset shift on behalf of all stakeholders in higher education.
What are the challenges, though, Dr. Patel, that we will have to overcome in harnessing more of the digital side of higher education? I'm thinking that if the challenge for the higher education system as we know it now is not enough space and seats in lecture theaters for physical attendance, for people to walk on campus and interact and be on campus, even the digital aspects, fusing those in trying to resolve that one issue will come with its own challenges. What are those?
Yeah, those challenges are numerous, and we can look at it in very simplistic terms. You alluded to the fact that our infrastructure in higher education is not necessarily geared for sustained access and for sustained quality access. So there's a question mark around how do we resolve that. But I like to believe that that's a resolvable issue. I'm not saying that it might be an easily resolvable issue, but it's resolvable. If we get the right stakeholders around the table and have the right type of quality conversations, I think we can resolve infrastructure issues relatively well. And that might be a blend of online learning, in-person learning with contact and the like. But perhaps let's call that the so-called easy bit then. The harder bit is ensuring that we keep pace with the changes in the world. And I spoke about that a short while ago. It's almost as though the future and the present has collapsed into one. That's the world we live in right now. And so the mindset shift of the professor, the lecturer, the administrator in a higher education institution needs to be one that is agile enough to respond to everything that's happening in the world and still deliver quality teaching and learning at scale. So that inner workings, the mechanics of higher education requires serious revolution and re-examination. And then again, I'm advocating for the fact that people don't know what they don't know. So if a student walks into higher education expecting something and they get something completely different, and they might start questioning why this is valuable. The answer to that question is not that it's not valuable. It's that it might only be valuable in some time to come. And it's almost that thankless mindset kind of higher education system we need to be establishing that will say, today we don't see why we're teaching in this manner. We can't fully explain why that's an important lesson to learn. But we have enough wherewithal in our thought processes, robust conversation, robust engagement that says in some time to come, our graduates in South Africa will finally look back on that education experience and be thankful for it because it's now proving useful in engaging the problems of tomorrow.
Will it also require a mindset shift in industry in how they view qualifications and education and the pathways, in that an education obtained via blended and online learning becomes as valuable as an education where I walked the hallowed halls of a campus somewhere, in the country?
Yeah, you're touching on an interesting point. I think industry, for their part, don't really struggle with the dilemma of equivalence between distance learners or distance graduates, rather, and those who came through a contact system. I think that there's a relative sense of equality and equity from those two types of graduates. I think where we still have room to develop insofar as industry is concerned is around the issue of the obsession with a degree or a diploma or some kind of certification as the precursor or entry point into employment. Because I think that becomes then a barrier to addressing the all-important issue around high rates of unemployment. So we'll always need certification. But again, it might be a different kind of certification. It might be aligned to the idea of micro-credentialing. We've seen the rise of micro-credentialing locally and abroad in such a meaningful manner. And that might become a point of development for industry to think about. But once it reaches critical mass, once sufficient industry players, industry bodies and the like have embraced that mindset, then we as education institutions and higher education in particular will be able to then work in a partnership mindset with industry. Not that that's not happening, but it's just, again, happening in a mindset shift paradigm rather than the...
All right, I've got to thank you for your time this afternoon. Fascinating conversation. Dr. Shahiem Patel is Academic Dean at Regent School. Still to come, in fact, let's go to it right away. The EFF leader, Julius Malema, calling on South Africans to play their part in strengthening the country's democracy. Speaking at the closing of the party's second plenum in Boksburg in Gauteng, Malema has urged